Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Daniel Reeser. That was Cantor Danielle Rodniski. We'll be joined in just a few moments in the leadership of this evening service by Rabbi Jonathan Blake, our senior rabbi here at Westchester Reform Temple, whom we warmly welcome back from the first part of his sabbatical. We've gathered together this Shabbat evening in commemoration of a somber day on the Jewish calendar. In addition to celebrating Shabbat, we also are this week holding in our hearts the day known as Yom HaShoah V'Hagvura, the day of remembering the Holocaust and celebrating the heroes who helped some people to survive that terrible time in world history and in Jewish history. Cantor Rodniski just welcomed us with immortal words, Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer Leolam. O God, I pray that these things never end. And indeed, our tradition affirms that even in the face of the worst atrocities imaginable to humankind, there are some things that are longer lasting even than the worst of human suffering, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, and importantly, the human heart and memory. This evening we'll engage in the important and longer lasting than suffering work of remembering the 6 million Jews and 5 million others who perished at the hands of the Nazi regime during the Holocaust. As is our custom every year at Westchester Reform Temple on this service of responsibility, we will light 6 memorial candles in memory of those 6 million. Earlier, before our service began, our 6th grade students and their families had the opportunity to hear a small snippet from Agnes Vertes, a Holocaust survivor, who is going to share her full story with us a little later on during the service. And as they heard her story, each of those 6th graders pledged themselves to remembering a child, one of the 1.5 million children who died during the Holocaust, and lifting up that person's life and legacy on the day that they celebrate their bar and bat mitzvah. We'll now prepare to take on the somber ritual of lighting 6 memorial candles in memory of the 6 million Jews who perished. We want to say a special thank you to 6 of our congregational families who each has a personal connection to the Holocaust, each of whom lit one of those memorial candles just now. So thank you for honoring us this evening, Linda and Lindsay Lindman, Michael Ziegelbaum and Kim Reichig, Karen Wolf, Sandra Oliver, Lisa Koenig, and Helena Rosenkrantz. Thank you for helping us to remember the victims of the Holocaust and to honor your own family story by being here this evening. Of course, we as Jews light candles not just in remembrance, but also light candles of joy, candles that help us to find a little bit of rest in a week that can be filled with so much busyness. And we'll do that now. We'll welcome Shabbat by lighting these candles. And we'll especially welcome one family who is celebrating a little bit of joy this weekend, a great joy this weekend. Danny Horn will tomorrow become bat mitzvah on our bima. And we invite Danny and her family now to light Shabbat candles along with us.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom and Mazel Tov, and I just want to say to Danny and her family, I can't wait to be on our bima tomorrow morning and celebrate your bat mitzvah, and the congregation extends a heartfelt Mazel Tov to you, as well as to Lindsay Frank and her family, who will be celebrating bat mitzvah on our bima in the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's nice to be back. I have enjoyed 3 months of sabbatical leave to engage in reflection and restorative practice and sacred study. Yes, I did let my hair grow a little bit, both actually and metaphorically. To be unplugged from Westchester Reform Temple and not to have to worry about the incredible set of responsibilities that comprise our day-to-day is a gift. And I want to thank my clergy colleagues, a couple of whom are with me tonight. And also, in addition to Rabbi Reeser and Cantor Rudnitsky, I want to especially thank our senior cantor, Amanda Kleinman, and our associate rabbi, Rabbi Levy, who directs our Jewish Learning Lab, our entire professional staff, our lay leadership, but most of all, I want to thank you, the congregation of Westchester Reform Temple, because you made this opportunity possible to take 3 months of winter leave, which I look forward to repeating next winter as well, to complete a 6-month sabbatical study period. I am reminded that the song Shalom Aleichem, the popular Shabbat hymn, imagines that whenever we welcome the Sabbath, we are accompanied by angels. And I want you to know that that's exactly how I felt when I was davening at home throughout these 12 weeks of sabbatical leave. Not just on Shabbat, but maybe especially on Shabbat, knowing that the congregation was in the hands of such capable and thoughtful spiritual leaders. But each and every one of the 89 days that I was on leave from WRT, I felt that I was in the presence of the angels who were guiding and guarding our families and our community and taking such good care of them. And I especially want to single out the amazing volunteers of our caring community, some of whom continue to deliver food to the needy and the hungry in our county, many of whom were assisting the elderly in our community with securing the opportunity to be vaccinated. And dozens of our senior citizen households have now obtained vaccination because of our volunteer program. People received caring calls when they were hospitalized and lonely and bereaved. For all of that, my angels, thank you. Let's welcome the Sabbath with Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei HaMlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Hamlachim,
In addition to the many who are joining us on our various streaming platforms and in our Zoom room tonight, I want to acknowledge the presence of the 6th grade class of the Jewish Learning Lab of Westchester Reform Temple. Every year at the service of responsibility, that is, the Friday night Shabbat service held closest to and in association with Yom HaShoah, our day for remembering the Holocaust, WRT invites its 6th graders and their parents to participate in a ritual before we worship together. At 5:45 this evening, our 6th graders and their families met with the clergy of the congregation and with tonight's guest speaker, Agnes Vertes, to accept the responsibility of remembering. Specifically, our 6th graders will be paired in the coming days with the memory of a child, one of the 1.5 million children who perished at the hands of the Nazis during the Holocaust. Very little is known about these children. In some cases, all that remains of a biographical sketch is a few words about the child's name, maybe the name of his or her parents, where the child may have been born, the camp and circumstances under which the child perished, and sometimes the age, always tragically so much too young that the child was murdered. And our students will accept the responsibility of remembering by naming these children at their celebrations of Bar and Bat Mitzvah in the next year or so when they come of age in the Jewish tradition. 6th graders, we are grateful for your presence here tonight. You are the last generation of children who will directly interact with people who survived the Shoah. Your responsibility, therefore, is very heavy indeed, but know that it is shared. Know that your community, your rabbis, your cantors, your family, and good people like our speaker tonight are going to help you lift up these memories and carry them forward as a living witness to your commitment, never again. May we never again allow the genocide of God's children. Tonight, our service, in reflection of the themes of Yom HaShoah, will be interpolated between the traditional liturgy, the prayers of our Shabbat service, and words that bring to mind the tragedy of the Holocaust and our commitment, our responsibility to fulfill the mandate never again. Week after week, in distress and under unsettled conditions, the Sabbath made a noble way possible for this people, one that was divorced from everything common. Rest was to reign on this day to last and smallest infant, from evening to evening, in order to banish all that draws downward, to provide the soul with a broad and lofty space. Without the Sabbath, this people would dispossess itself. Where the Sabbath is understood, so is this people understood. Thus wrote Rabbi Leo Beck in the concentration camp Theresienstadt. Leo Beck was a rabbi who led Shabbat services in the most unthinkable and horrific of conditions in the camps of the Shoah. If you are able and so moved, you may rise at this time as we are called to prayer. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed. You're welcome to be seated as we listen to the last will and testament of Holocaust victim Yossel Rockover. I, Yossel Rockover, descendant of great and pious families, write these lines while the Warsaw Ghetto goes up in flames. As the firing around me becomes weaker and the last defenders of this outpost fall, I die peacefully but not complacently, persecuted but not enslaved, a believer, not a supplicant. And these are my last words to you, my wrathful God. Nothing will avail you. You have done everything to make me renounce you, to make me lose my faith. But I die exactly as I have lived, a believer. Eternally praised be the God of the dead, the God of truth and law, who will soon show your face to the world again and shake its foundations with your almighty voice, as together we proclaim the watchword of our faith. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. We're about to offer Micha Mocha, our people's prayer, our song of freedom. It may seem incongruous to sing a song of freedom on a night that reflects on so many who were enslaved and sent to untimely deaths. However, I want to reflect on one theme of our freedom song and that moment in the Torah that describes how our people went free. The Torah reports that when the Israelites were finally free from hundreds of years of bondage, that they left Egypt accompanied by what the Torah calls in Hebrew, Erev Rav. Literally means a mixed multitude, a big group all mixed up together. Rav is the Hebrew word for great or large, mighty, and Erev is a word that means all mixed up. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I've heard this word Erev before, it's because you have. Erev is also the word that means evening time. Sometimes we refer to this service as an Erev Shabbat service, or Kol Nidre as Erev Yom Kippur. Erev is all mixed up. Why? Because it is twilight. It's not quite day, it's not quite night, it's a little bit of both, they're blended. And that's why this time of day specifically is known as Erev. And here's one more way in which the Hebrew language continues to inspire our thinking. Tonight we refer to our service at WRT as the service of responsibility. This is more than just a Yom HaShoah observance. This is a service of what in Hebrew is called arevut. Now, if that word sounds a little bit like Erev, that's because it's from Erev. It's a word that means responsibility. The word in Hebrew arevut, or responsibility, is directly conjugated from Erev. Therefore, responsibility is the quality of being all mixed up in the business of other human beings, in the business of God's creation. And so now back to the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude that went free from Egypt. You see, Jewish people have never experienced a solitary destiny. We have always been all mixed up with the rest of God's children. What that means is that in our times of freedom and power and empowerment, it's the Jewish responsibility to make sure that we get all mixed up in the business of those who remain in the shackles of oppression and subjugation, and bring God's power of freedom to the rest of the human family. It also means that when we reflect on our own tragic suffering, the chapters of Jewish history and memory like the one we commemorate tonight, the Shoah, we remember that this is not just about remembering how Jews have been the victims of history and fate and evil enemies, but rather are all mixed up in the fate and the well-being of all of God's children. It is our arevut, our responsibility, to take our Jewish mandate to be a light unto the nations and to learn from our often tragic history that we have a responsibility to all the suffering of God's children, wherever they may be, whatever they look like, whatever nationality, ethnicity, or religion they claim. That is what it means to be a Jew. That is what it means to be part of an Erev Rav. we sing Mi Chamocha together.
וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashkiveinu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkiveinu לשלום. V'hamidenu, shomrenu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu, sukat shlomecha. Hashkiveinu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkiveinu לשלום. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. We continue with our Amidah. Adonai sfatai tiftach. Adonai sfatai tiftach. Ufi yagid tehilatecha. Ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu ve'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. We now take a few moments for silent prayer and reflection. Ilse Weber was a Czech Jew who settled in Prague in the 1930s with her husband and her son, Tommy. She wrote melodies and theater pieces for children to perform, and in 1942, when she and her family were transported to Theresienstadt, she was put to work in the children's infirmary there, and in order to comfort the children, she secretly gave them medicine, which was of course forbidden for the Jewish prisoners, but she also sang to them. She sang them these songs that sounded comforting like lullabies, but whose words touched a little bit on the horrors of the things that they were seeing in the camp. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, Ilse's husband was set to be deported to Auschwitz. And in order to keep the family together and not knowing what they would find there, Ilse decided to bring herself and her son along with her husband. And as soon as they arrived, she and the little boy were sent straight to the gas chamber. This is Vigala by Ilse Weber. Vigala, Vigala, Weyer, the wind plays on a lyre, it sweetly plays in reeds so green, the nightingale his song will sing. Vigala, Vigala, Weyer, the wind plays on a lyre. Vigala, Vigala, Verna, the moon is like a lantern, above it stands in darkness cold and gazes down upon this world. Vigala, Vigala, Verna, the moon is like a lantern.
This Shabbat, as we remember the pain that the Jewish people has carried in its heart since the middle of the 20th century, we also take a moment in the middle of our service to pause, as we always do, to think not only of our collective pain, but also of the personal, individual pains that many in our congregational family may be carrying right now. We'll offer together a prayer for healing. And I'd invite you, if there's someone that you're praying for this Shabbat, to share their name with us in the chat on whatever platform you're tuning in this evening. Or if you prefer, you can draw their face into your mind's eye, send a little bit of love their way. This evening, Westchester Reform Temple is praying for healing for the following people: for Melech, for Ezra Yarden ben Harav Elkanah Leib v'Haraba Eliana Leah, Stephen Bleckman, Anthony and Elizabeth Danker, Mordechai ben Yaakov, Dr. Herbert Newman, Rolly Coran, Norman Goldberg, Georgette Nussbaum, Deborah Kapnick, Nicole Shusey, Neil Glaskell, Joshua Gendel, Andrea Rayner, Chaim Ben Sipora, Masha Batsora, Leah Greenspan, Aviva Tzila Bat Esther Bela, Dan Sokoloff, Jeffrey Millman, Ken Master, Chava Batsara, Eliyahu Chaim Ben Fradel, Sheila Freed, Tanya Romanoff, Molly Citron, Howard Cowan, Yitzchak Yona Ben May, Malka Tzipora Bas Rachel, Tamar Bat Malka, Heschel Meir Ben David Achana, David Ze'ev Ben Fruma Etzel, Mark Wolf, Shai Aviad Ben Balfora, Alter Shmuel Ben Chava Leah, and others whom we hold in our hearts. We offer now our prayer Misha Beirach for healing. It's our honor this evening to have as our guest Agnes Vertes. Ms. Vertes shared already with some of our sixth grade families a little bit of her story of survival from the Holocaust, and she'll share her story with our whole congregation now. I'll mostly let her tell the story, but I'll just give a little bit of bio by way of introduction. Agnes Vertes is president of the Child Holocaust Survivors of Connecticut and is a board member of the Jewish Historical Society. She teaches weekly, is a volunteer for the Shoah Foundation, and is also a documentary filmmaker. In 2013, Ms. Vertes produced Passport for Life, a documentary about the thousands of Jews that were saved from the Nazis. She was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1940. Please welcome now to Westchester Reform Temple, Agnes Vertes.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, for that lovely introduction. And It is a long story. I don't know if we have time for it. I was a little girl, a spoiled little girl, because I was born into a very wealthy modern Orthodox family. Actually, my father's family was the wealthy one, and they weren't very religious. My mother's family were rather poor and very, very religious. So anyway, we had a good life. My mother had a cook, a maid, and I had a nanny, and it was okay. But as you know, Hungary was an ally of Germany. I don't know, but the Hungarians are always on the wrong side, and they were then too. They were allies of the Nazis, the Germans, and there were plenty of Nazis in Hungary too, the Hungarians. And they taught our Jewish fellow men and women that who thought that they were Hungarian first and Jews second. Well, they were taught a lesson that according to the rest of the country, they are just Jews, not Hungarians. And well, as I said, I was a very little girl. I was not quite 4 when things really started to be very dangerous in Hungary. As a matter of fact, the Hungarians were the only ones in that area who had the the largest and the best factory that could make all sorts of war material and everything. It was an enormous complex, and by the way, it was owned by a Jewish family, the Weisses. And the Weisses were lucky enough to be able to negotiate for their whole family to get out of the country before the Germans could even take over their factory. Now, March 19th, 1944 was a day that nobody who was alive at that time over there will ever forget. It was like 9/11 here. Who would forget 9/11 if you were alive at that time? And even before, the Brits and the Americans were bombing because of that industrial complex that was located there. And I guess the Brits were coming in the morning, the Americans in the afternoon. So mostly we had to stay in the shelter. Now, my parents decided that it would be better for my little sister, who was not quite 2 years old at the time, and myself and my mother to go to relatives in the countryside who had vineyards. Jewish family who owned land and were a very well-to-do family. My mother's brother was married into the family. So we went down there, and certainly the Allies did not bomb vineyards, because what did they care? The vineyards could not create any war material. So we didn't stay very long there. And in the meantime, as I said, on March 19th, 1944, overnight, the Germans occupied Hungary. And I could tell you the reasons for it, but I don't think I have time to go into the historical complications. Anyway, my father already was wearing the yellow star, because anyone over the age of 6 had to wear a yellow star, indicating that they were Jews, as of April 5th. And so he was already wearing the yellow star, and I don't know how, but he made it down to this little town where we were and told my mother that you better come back to Budapest, which even then was a city of more than 1 million people. And by the way, 1/4 of them were Jews. So every 4th person was wearing a yellow star. Anyway, I wasn't wearing a yellow star because I was only 4. And My father even had tickets for us so that we can go back to Budapest, because he said that in a little town where the vineyards were, everybody knows who is a Jew, but in a city of 1 million, you can somehow hide. And we went to the railroad station, and that's my first memory. It was an impossible pandemonium there. All these peasant women with the 100 skirts. I mean, the more skirts they wore, the richer they were. And they were there with their, I don't know how many kids and chickens and ducks and geese, and they were all flying around. And the men were sitting on the ground and eating their bacon with their knife. And finally, the train comes. And of course, we were going to get on the train. And each time we wanted to get on, we were thrown off, just pushed off. And of course, it didn't take an Einstein to figure it out that it was because of the yellow star, which marked us as Jews. So my father picked me up, covered the yellow star with me, and my mother covered her yellow star with my sister. And now we got on the train. We even got seats because, European society, if you are very old or if you have children, you get a seat. And the train was chugging along towards Budapest. And all of a sudden, either I moved or my sister, and they noticed the yellow star. Oh my God, do you know they wanted to throw us off the train? It was frightening. I remember this, even though I was 4 years old. When I speak to children in school, I always ask them, what do you remember when you were 4 years old? And inevitably, it's something either terrible that happened to them or something really wonderful. So anyway, from another car, some other soldiers, and don't ask me what kind of soldiers they were, because even today I would not be able to recognize whatever emblems they had on. But I think they were Serbs, but I don't know. And when they saw that the Hungarians, who were also soldiers, they were lay people and soldiers in that car, and they looked and they said, "What kind of people are you? You want to throw little kids off the train?" And then the Hungarians called them Jew lovers. And then all I remember is they were rolling on the floor and they were fighting. And my dad said, "You know what? We got to get out of here because it doesn't matter who wins, the Jew always loses." So he said, "Let's go to the last car," because when the train approaches the main railroad station of Budapest, it slows down quite a bit. And he thought that we should jump before it goes to the railroad station, because in the past couple of weeks, any Jew who was even around the railroad station was picked up and never seen again. So really, the train did slow down considerably. And even though my mother thought it was a crazy idea, my father jumped first, and my mother threw me to him, and then she threw my sister, and then she jumped. I remember this, but it didn't have an effect on me. I didn't realize the danger, you see. And I don't know how we got home, because Jews were not able to ride any of the trams or trolleys or subway or anything. The transportation system in Budapest was incredible, and it still is incredible. You don't have to walk more than a block and you find something to take you wherever you want to go. So we got home, and they started teaching me about Protestant prayers and little songs that a 4-year-old little girl should know who is Protestant. And my father was a very well-connected individual, and he had connections at City Hall. And I don't know what he paid or how he did it, but he got us on the regular forms, birth certificates, which were exactly the same as the original, except on the original I was Agnes Katz. On the new one I was Agnes Kovacs. On the original I was Israelite. On the new one I was Protestant. And so it was all changed, but it was very authentic. Now, I remember that we no longer had any servants because Jews were not allowed to have non-Jewish servants, and we did have a cook who was a kosher cook, but she went home to her children, and of course was murdered in Auschwitz too. But one day, a woman came and picked up my sister and took her away. And hey, a 4-year-old, I don't ask questions. I don't know what's happening. And so she took my sister, Susanna. And 2 weeks later, she came for me. And she told my mother, don't cry and don't follow us, because nobody should know what's happening here, because maybe one of your neighbors will go to the authorities and then we're going to be in trouble. And she told me, she actually screamed at me and she said, and you don't even make a sound and don't cry, definitely don't cry. Okay, so she picks me up and she's walking with me to the tram stop. And of course I am looking over her shoulder and I see that my mother is following us, even though she was told not to. And I saw that she was crying. And then when the tram came and we got on it, I still saw my mother. And as the tram was going further and further away, my mother got smaller and smaller until she disappeared. And then I started yelling and crying like a crazy person. But, you know, that was okay, because many times children don't like to travel on trams or trains or whatever. So nobody paid too much attention to it. When we arrived at the place where this woman lived, my sister was already there and she was just elated and she was yelling, Agika, Agika, and she was hugging me. And I was glad to see her, of course. But I have never been in a house like that. I came from luxury, and here is a one-room house, which I couldn't really call a house. I would call it maybe a hut. It had packed dirt floors. No, not even linoleum, packed dirt. And it had electricity, but no running water and no toilets. And we had to go to an outhouse. Now that was my nightmare. I had such nightmares because I was little, and the outhouse had a pretty large circle there. And I thought, oh my God, what if I fall into all that muck? What am I going to do? And of course, I just had nightmares, but I never really fell in there. And there were bombings going on constantly, but food was very scarce. And my father was saved all through the Holocaust by his friend from university days. They went to university together. And this man was, I think, not only a righteous Christian, he was a saint. He saved anybody who was saved in my family, this man saved. And he became a colonel in the regular Hungarian army, and he could commandeer a vehicle or anything he wanted. And so he used to put on his uniform and get whatever he could get on the black market. And every week he brought some food to us where we were. And then one day during an air raid, the house or the shack was demolished. And the lady sent word to my parents that she can't keep us anymore because we have no roof above our heads. And so my parents sent Mr. Slanyi, that's my father's colonel friend, and he came to take us back to my parents. Of course, my mother and my father were hiding separately. My father was hiding with his friend. And of course, he charged nothing, but he found a place for my mother with a lieutenant who used to report to him when he was still active, whom they had to pay. But anyway, mom's history did not involve two children, so she really couldn't keep us. And so this woman said to Mr. Sani, listen, I am not letting you take these children. I am going to go with you because I promised those parents that I will never, ever give them to anybody except to them. Well, how is that for a righteous Christian? An amazing lady. I still remember her name. Her name was Mrs. Konus. Extraordinarily poor, but extraordinarily righteous. So anyway, we're going towards, going on the street towards the vehicle that Mr. Slani has gotten. And all of a sudden, the Hungarian Nazis who were called Nyilas, which means arrow cross, and that was their name because their insignia was two arrows crossing. And one of them came around the corner and he was yelling at everybody saying, everybody on the sidewalk, nobody in the middle of the road. And, you know, I went on the sidewalk, I went on the corner, and around the corner, they were herding just like cattle, people, men, women, and children, even some kids my age. And the people standing on the sidewalk, you know what they did? They were yelling "Bidder, which means stinking Jews, and drop dead. And they were throwing rocks at them and whatever they could throw at them. And I am standing there. And, you know, when you're 4 years old, it doesn't mean much. You're Jew, you're not a Jew, you're Catholic, you're Protestant. Who cares? But then when I saw that, how these people were being whipped, actually with whips, and pushed with the butts of the rifles, I was just hit like with a lightning. Aha, this is what it means to be a Jew. That's why I can't tell anybody what my real name is. You know, I never forgot about that. I had nightmares about that. And when we got to my mother, I'm going to make it shorter because a lot of things happened. Mom couldn't keep us. So she and Mr. Slani took us to all sorts of Jewish homes. Now, the Jewish community did establish some homes for the Jewish kids who had no parents around because the father was taken earlier in 1941, 42, 43 for slave labor. And the mother, every time there was a raid on the streets, they picked up the Jewish women and took them on a death march to Austria. And so there were many Jewish children who had no parents around. But there were also many non-Jewish children who had no parents around because the bombs did not know who was a Jew and who wasn't a Jew. And a lot of people died during these bombings. So, and I remember that they couldn't put us in any home because they were all chock full. And one time we were returning from one of those homes. And as I said to you, the bombs don't know who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. And we were taking the tram, and all of a sudden, the air raid, the sirens go off. And Mom said, okay, kids, we're getting off. And we went into the lobby of a building. We didn't go down to the shelter because it was in the neighborhood where we used to live. And Mom was afraid that somebody might recognize us. And then the air raid had started. Oh my God, the noise. It was incredible, incredible. I couldn't hear for a couple of weeks after that. And it was horrible. Everywhere, flames and houses collapsing. And when it was all over, we went outside and the tram that we got off of was on its side. It was completely burned black, and the people who stayed on it were also completely burned black. Well, finally, they did find a place for us on the other side of the Danube. Budapest has the Danube River, quite mighty, cutting it in half. The hilly side, Buda on one side, and Pest, where most of the Jews lived, on the flat side. And so they found a home. It happened to be a Jewish home, but they didn't say it was Jewish, but well, all the kids there were Jews, and even the adults who cared for us were Jews. But they didn't know that my sister and I were Jews, and because our papers were, authentic, and they thought we looked Aryan. Of course, we were so Aryan, only 100% Jewish, but that's a different story. And every time the SS or the Hungarian Arrow Cross came to try to ferret out Jewish children, and if they found Jewish children, they took them out and murdered them, of course. And every time they came, the adults who were Jews and did not know we were Jewish, they always took our papers, showed them the papers, and said, "Look at these beautiful Aryan children. All we have here is Aryan children." Usually they left. And one time, a very, very nasty pair of Hungarian Nazis, Arrow Cross, came, and when they showed us and the papers, they said, "No, we want everybody's papers." Now you can imagine those who understood what it meant, probably their blood turned into ice in their veins. And my little sister, who was 2 years old and just learned to speak, she ran over to this nasty Nazi and she pulled on his pants and said, "Hey, Mr. Soldier, can I try on your hat?" And the Nazi melted. And he threw her up in the air and turned to his companion, "Can anyone but an Aryan child be as cute as this one?" And they left. And this is how my little sister saved 100 Jewish children while everyone thought we were the Aryans. But after this, things were okay. We even had a garden where we could play. But then the house-to-house fighting started for the city of Budapest, and the Germans took all their equipment up to the roof because we had a flat roof. And the Russians were already at the end of the garden, and they were shooting at one another, and we were inside. Well, the adults pushed all the high furniture against the windows facing the garden, and we were under mattresses on the floor. So if a stray bullet would come in, had to go through the window, the furniture, and the mattress. Nobody got hit by any bullets because by the time they got through the mattress, it was dead bullets. But the problem was that the Germans on top, they were also shooting. I mean, they were shooting at each other. And my sister Susanna and I, Susanna was very little, so only remembered this one thing, that we were shaking like leaves on a tree. We were so scared underneath the mattress. And then one day, the house caught fire. And the Germans came down from the roof, and they didn't want to let us go. So the house was getting burned up, more and more flames. And we're standing inside there. They don't let us go. And they said that they were so hungry, and unless they get food, nobody goes anywhere. And of course, who had food? No peasant would be crazy enough to bring in food into a city under siege, and no stores were open. Nobody had food. So finally, one of the very smart women looked at everything, and she found a little bit of flour. And she said to these Germans, "If you let the children go, then I will make you pancakes." And they let us go. Now, this was the absolute coldest winter in Budapest. But it had a silver lining in a sense, because had it been warmer, half of the city would have died of some sort of disease, because nobody took care of burying the dead and the dead parts of human beings. So it was horrendous. They were just frozen into the ground. And of course, I was already a big girl. Nobody carried me. They carried my sister. And I was, going and stumbling. And I finally fell on a dead woman's body. And I remember this. I had so many nightmares. I could not sleep. I couldn't get to school when I was school age, because I fell on this woman with her eyes open, blue eyes, and I was absolutely, I couldn't move. I couldn't move. And she was so cold. And when you are a little kid, they talk to you about dying. Yeah, what about dying? Who cares? You don't know what it means. But somehow, this cold woman with the eyes just staring, it reminded me that this must be dying. And finally, they got me off of her. That night, we found a barn where we slept. And then we were divided into groups of 10, because nobody would take in 100 kids. And it was a tremendous, tremendous storm with ice and snow and everything. But I loved the snow, because the snow looked like beautiful lace things. And it was okay. I was walking in the snow. It was terribly cold. And we were actually walking to the Reverend Stelo. Now, the Reverend Stelo was a real, I can't even tell you what he was. He was a saint. He saved close to 1,000 Jewish boys, which was much more difficult than saving Jewish girls. And I guess you know why, because of course the rest of the population was not circumcised, but the Jews were. In fact, when they were asking for papers on the street, when they had closed the street down and they took everybody's papers, and if they suspected somebody was a Jew, even though the papers were good, they made him drop his pants. If he was circumcised, he was gone. So anyway, so we got to the Reverend Stelo, and his house was full of boys, Jewish boys only. And he said, well, I don't have any room for girls. You can sleep here tonight because it's a terrible storm, but tomorrow you have to leave. And we slept on the floor, and he gave us dinner. Oh my God, it was canned asparagus, 3 or 4 stalks of canned asparagus. I still hate asparagus because of that horrible tasting thing. And the next morning we left, and we didn't have any place to live. So then for I don't know how long, because a child's perception of time is not as good as an adult's. I don't know if it was 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we lived on the street. It was horribly cold. Sometimes when we found a bombed out house that had some form of shelter, we would stay in there, and we had no food. Do you know what we ate? We ate snow, clean snow, and we washed in the snow, so we didn't have lice, okay? And the worst part came when we finally were taken to a home. I believe it was Catholic, because every Sunday they had a service. So it had to be Catholic. And it was incredibly crowded and filthy. And we didn't get, we got practically no food the whole week. And we got this, the lice too. And there are all kinds of lice, head lice, body lice, clothing lice, all kinds. and they had it all. And it was incredibly crowded, so you couldn't avoid getting this. And on Sunday, after the service, in a little bowl, we got like 3 or 4 white cherries. Oh my God, that was like manna from heaven. To this day, if I see white cherries, I gotta buy it, because that is something incredible. And my sister Susanna got very high fever, and they isolated her. And I was frantic. What if she disappears too, like my mom and dad? Then I'll be all alone in the world. What am I going to do? And I went to see her every few minutes, and she was still there, so I was happy. But I didn't have to wait too long. I got the same sickness. I didn't know until about 6 months ago what we had, but then I asked a friend of mine who was a cardiologist and speaks both English and Hungarian, and I said, "Listen, Peter, do you know what this means in English?" And he says to me, "Dummy, that means tuberculosis." So that's what we had. But in addition to that, I had a bonus. I had a disease which I never found the name of in English. I was broken out, my entire body, with pussy things, and it hurt like unbelievable. And so by the time, well, I don't know when we were liberated, because nobody told us, and how would I know? I wasn't yet 5, and I was very sick, and both Susanna and I were skin and bones, just like the people you see in the camps. And finally, Mom came with Mr. Slimy across to Buddha, because when the Germans retreated, they blew up all the bridges. So people couldn't come from one side of the city to the other. And then the Russians built a temporary bridge. And that's how Mom came across. And she went to the Red Cross and asked them if they know that she has 2 little girls here, either by the name of Agnes and Susanna Katz or Agnes and Susanna Kovacs. And they said, well, we know that they escaped from the burning house, but we don't know where they are. So you have to go to all the children's homes and even maybe private homes to find them. And then she found us, and the Russians were guarding the bridgehead. And when they saw these 2 skin and bone kids, they felt so sorry for us. They gave each one of us a loaf of bread. Do you know what that meant? We haven't seen bread in months. And, I ate a little bit, because that's the way I am. My sister wolfed down the whole thing, and she got even sicker than she was before. But the thing is that we survived. Now, I have a couple of pictures that I don't know if it would show if I turn this around. Would that show? Yeah. Okay. So let's see if I can get this. Can you see this picture?
Yes.
Okay, that's the business, and my grandfather is on the. Let me just do it so that maybe you can see it better. This is my grandfather on the end. Come on. This is Grandpa. Okay. These are my parents. Oh my God. Okay, there they are. These are my parents. Very modern. This is little me. I don't know if I can show you. Here we are. That's little me when I was 3 years old. Now, this is the most important picture that I have here. And I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this picture?
Yes.
Okay, now, this is my aunt. This is a wedding outside of Budapest, an Orthodox Jewish wedding, okay? And this is my grandma. Of course, the groom isn't there because it's a very religious wedding. The groom was my mother's oldest brother. So this is my grandma Glock. This is my mother behind her. She's 16. and my mother's older brother, Meyer, who is, I guess, 18 there, and the youngest brother, who is here, I don't know, maybe 8 years old, my uncle Michael. And the reason I showed this picture, and I always take this with me, because if you look at how many people there are on this picture, you know that out of all these people, this was taken in 1930, out of all these people, only my mother and her two brothers survived. She had 5 gorgeous blonde and blue-eyed kids. No one survived. None of these people survived. So this kind of gives you an idea of the devastation that went on in Hungary. And so I just wanted to show you this, because a picture, as they say, is worth 1,000 words. And I want to tell you that for a long time, I was very, very upset, because I felt that I survived and I'm nobody. Why did I survive? Why didn't somebody like, I don't know, Einstein or Bernstein? Why didn't some kids like that survive? Why me? And I had guilty feelings about that, until I discovered that I can be the voice of those who cannot speak anymore. And this is kind of helped me with my problem. And I don't know if anybody wants to ask questions, or we are through.
So Agnes, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Anyone who's in the Zoom will be invited after the service, if you'd like to speak with Ms. Vertes, to join us then and ask any questions. For now, we'll say thank you so much for your presentation.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I have taken an oath to remember it all, to remember, to forget nothing at all.
We'll begin to conclude our service with the words Aleinu l'shabeach. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'teit gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kimishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vigor aleinu kechol hamonam. Va'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. We have lived in numberless towns and villages. In too many of them, we have endured cruel suffering. Some we have forgotten, others are sealed into our memory, a wound that does not heal. 100 generations of victims and martyrs, and still their blood cries out from the earth. And so many at Dachau, at Buchenwald, at Auschwitz, at Bergen-Belsen, at Baba Yar, and what can we say? What can we do? How bear the unbearable or accept what life has brought to our people? All who are born must die, but how shall we compare the slow passage of time with the callous slaughter of the innocent, cut off before their time? They lived with faith, not all, but many. And surely many died with faith, faith in God, in life, in the goodness that even flames cannot destroy. May we find a way to the strength of that faith, that trust, that sure sense that life and soul endure beyond this body's death. They have left their lives to us. Let a million prayers rise whenever Jews worship. Let a million candles glow against the darkness of these unfinished lives. We'll prepare now to offer the words of Mourner's Kaddish, and as we do so, we'll hold in our hearts the 6 million Jews and the 5 million others who perished at the hands of the Nazi regime. And this Shabbat, we're of course holding in our hearts all those in our WRT extended congregational family who have died either in recent weeks or at this time in years past. When you hear the name of your loved one read aloud, I invite you, if you're able, to rise where you are. We remember first those most recently taken from us. Nathan S. Dayan, cousin of Cheryl Spivak Braun. Ellie Ellis, wife of Bob Ellis and grandmother of Jesse and Lindsay Mayman. Judith Martieli, sister of Michael Simberkoff. Marcia Cohn, mother of Nathaniel Cohn. Lawrence Fahrenbaker, father of Larry Fahrenbaker. Rabbi Michael J. Cook, friend and colleague of Rabbi Jonathan Blake. Mariana Dranitz, mother of Karen Wolf. Karen Adler, mother of Joshua Adler. Alan John Ryan, husband of Valerie Ryan. And on their yahrzeit, the anniversary of their death, we remember Samuel Aaron, Linda Carol Ackerman, Robert Bader, Joseph Bender, Ann Bernstein, Mildred Borer, Samson Broadwin, Arnold Bronson, Minnie Chernin, Fred Dalal, Lester Dembitzer, Hazel Dute, Edith Eisman, Dorothy Escher, Frida Feiner, Sylvia Fishman, G. David Frankel, Harry Ginsberg, Nathan Glickman, Theodore Gold, Philip Goldenberg, Lenora Goldstein, Henry Graff, Samuel S. Kaufman, Sarah Kaufman, Minnie Kestenbaum, Richard A. Kirstein, Sidel Chrisberg, Harry Levin, Rosalie Siegel, Alan Lind, Bruce Liss, Dorothy Mantell, Beatrice Margolis, Yvonne Marks, Jane Nussbaum, Arthur Oakes Jr., Edward Piper, Sandra Ortner, Joseph David Perloff, Irving Pollard, Millicent Rappaport, Selmore Rubinoff, Chet Safian, Kenneth Safian, Dorothy Sarrett, Beverly Schaefer, Don Sharoff, William Schechter, Irving Schreiber, Saul Shapiro, Alan Sheldon, Rose Smith, Harry Specter, Ira Toff, Seymour Wang, Harry Weinstein, Henry Weissman Jr., Irene Werner, Joel Willis, Elaine Weiner, Hannah Wolf. If there are any names to add to our commemoration that have not yet been said aloud, or any that I've inadvertently mispronounced, I invite you to say them or share them via the chat at this time. We offer the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, giving thanks for the gift of life. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, B'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'yizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei al-maya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit romam v'yit naseh, v'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal, Shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiran b'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May God send comfort to those who are bereaved and comfort to all those who mourn, to which we say, Amen. A few brief announcements before we conclude our service. First, we remind everyone that our observance of Shabbat continues into tomorrow with Torah study at 9 a.m. and with sharing Shabbat beginning at 10:30 a.m. And we look forward down the road to our combined weekend, which will be both our Margie and Morgan Miller Scholar in Residence weekend and also a tribute to our outgoing synagogue president, Marcy R. Harris. That's Sunday, May 16th at 2:30 in the afternoon. Please continue to watch your e-blast for information about how you can join us via Zoom and learn with our guest scholar, who is Dr. Andrew Rayfeld, president of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, the school that trains all Reform Jewish leaders, clergy, and otherwise. Sunday, May 16th, please save that date. We look forward next week to turning from sorrow towards a renewed sense of joy and of hope by celebrating first Yom HaZikaron, a day of memorial in Israel, and then Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. We invite you to join us both on Thursday and on Friday for two separate programs celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's independence. Please check our e-blast for more information about those two Thursday and Friday programs in honor of Israel's birthday. And then finally, not next Friday, when we'll celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, but the Friday after that, we'll observe our annual tradition of Chai Society Shabbat. Chai is the Hebrew number 18. People who've been, families, congregants who've been a part of Westchester Reform Temple for 18 or more years will be honored in a special way. Please join us on Friday, April 23rd, 2 weeks from tonight, for our Chai Society Shabbat. We want to make sure to, again, wish Mazel Tov to Danny Horn and also to Lindsay Frank on becoming Benot Mitzvah tomorrow morning. And most especially, we want to thank our guest, Agnes Vertes, for sharing your story with us tonight and for inspiring us with your wisdom and with your life. Thank you for being with us, Agnes. Let us conclude with words of joy by lifting a full cup of something sweet. Cantor?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen l'chaim.
L'chaim. And now let us give thanks for everything in our life that sustains us, not only food, but also the wisdom of our tradition and community. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. If you're here with us in the Zoom, we'll invite you now up to be an attendee if you'd like to schmooze with one another or ask a question or say a word to Ms. Vertes. We're so glad you've joined us. To everyone else who's joining via social media, Shabbat Shalom.